When I slipped out of my body, there was no pain, nothing. And when I drew that final breath, it was like I could finally breathe for the very first time. Really, truly breathe. The feeling was absolutely extraordinary, like pure electricity running through my soul. It was like, oh my God, this is who I actually am. This is the real me. I felt myself expanding, growing larger than I'd ever been. I remember floating there, watching it all happen below me. I could see the paramedics rushing across the church parking lot toward my collapsed body. They lifted me onto that stretcher and immediately started working on me, doing everything they could to bring me back. I just watched it all unfold like I was viewing some incredible movie, and I was filled with this overwhelming emotion. These people don't even know my name, but look how desperately they're fighting for my life. For the first time ever, I looked down at my physical body with genuine appreciation, thinking, yes, I'm so grateful for that vessel. I'm grateful for my time in it, but that shell down there, that's not really who I am. I'm Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, and I grew up in Arapahoe, Nebraska. If you've never heard of it, don't worry. Most people haven't. We're talking about maybe 800 souls in the whole town. One main street, a handful of shops, and everybody knew not just your name, but your business too. You never locked your front door, and half the time people left their car keys sitting right on their kitchen counter. It was that kind of place where your neighbor would bring you soup when you were sick, before you even mentioned you weren't feeling well. Looking back now, there's so much beauty in that simplicity that I completely missed at the time. I was involved in everything: student government, drama club, volleyball team, church youth group. I sang in the choir and helped organize the annual corn festival. But somewhere around 7th grade, something shifted. Suddenly, it mattered desperately what you looked like, how you dressed, whether you were thin enough, pretty enough, popular enough. And for whatever reason, I became absolutely obsessed with the idea that I wasn't measuring up. I remember standing in front of my bedroom mirror, pinching at skin that wasn't even there, convinced I was hideous. The other girls seemed so confident, so effortlessly beautiful. I felt like I was constantly falling short, like everyone could see my flaws even when I couldn't figure out what they were. That's when the voice in my head started getting louder. You're not good enough, Sarah. That's why you don't fit in. That's why they whisper when you walk by. You need to fix yourself. So I started trying to fix myself. I was 13 when I first made myself throw up after dinner. I told myself it was just once, just to see if it would help, but that once became twice, then every few days, then almost daily. I got really good at hiding it, running the water, playing music, making excuses to disappear after meals. The weird thing is, I was never actually overweight. When I look at pictures from high school now, I see this normal, healthy teenage. But in my mind, I was enormous. The bulimia followed me everywhere. High school, college, my wedding day. I threw up my wedding breakfast in my beautiful white dress. When I had my first baby, I was purging within weeks of giving birth through job interviews, family gatherings, church services. It was like this dark companion that never left my side. Whenever I felt stressed, inadequate, or out of control, there it was, whispering that familiar lie. This will make you feel better. This will make you worthy. After nursing school, I got my first job at a clinic where the doctors were prescribing this new miracle diet pill called Redux. It was supposed to be revolutionary. All the benefits of weight loss without the struggle. The doctors made it sound so medical, so safe. I'd never touched drugs in my life, barely even drank alcohol. But this was different. This was medicine prescribed by physicians. How dangerous could it be? What they didn't tell me, what I didn't understand, was that this little white pill was basically pharmaceutical speak. I should have been on it for maybe 3 months under careful supervision. Instead, I found ways to stay on it for over 8 years. 8 years of my life disappeared into that prescription bottle. The pill made everything seem possible. I didn't need to eat. Food seemed irrelevant. I didn't need to sleep. Who had time for sleep when there was so much to accomplish? I was like this hypercharged version of myself, always moving, always busy, always productive. My house was spotless. My work was perfect. I was involved in every committee and volunteer opportunity. From the outside, I probably looked like I had everything together. But inside, my body was screaming. I started having these terrifying episodes where I'd finally lie down at night, exhausted, and just as I'd begin to drift off to sleep, I'd suddenly jolt awake, gasping and choking. It felt like my lungs had forgotten how to work on their own. I'd have to jump out of bed and literally bounce up and down, trying to restart my breathing. It was like my entire respiratory system was shutting down. The not sleeping made everything worse. I'd be outside at 2 a.m, trimming hedges in the dark or reorganizing our entire garage. One night, my husband found me in the backyard digging up our entire flower garden because I'd decided it needed to be completely redesigned right then, at midnight, in my pajamas. These weren't normal behaviors, but I couldn't see how far I'd drifted from reality. My husband tried to talk to me so many times. He'd find me pacing the house at 3 a.m. or discover I hadn't eaten anything in 2 days, and he'd beg me to tell him what was wrong, but I was drowning in shame. How could I explain that I was addicted to diet pills, that I was slowly killing myself trying to be perfect, that the woman he married was disappearing, 1 pill at a time? The night everything changed started like so many others, me lying in bed, feeling my heart racing, struggling to breathe. But this time was different. This time, when I jolted awake, gasping for air, the jumping didn't help. The panic didn't subside. I spent the entire night sitting on the edge of our bed, trying to breathe, trying not to wake him, trying to convince myself I was going to be okay. When morning came, I looked like death. My husband took one look at me and said, "Sarah, this has to stop. I can't watch you die in front of me." He was exhausted too. Months of watching me deteriorate, of sleepless nights, of trying to hold our family together while I fell apart. He said, "The kids need their mother, and I need my wife. You're going to that hotel down on Route 30, and you're going to sleep for 12 hours straight." I should have told him the truth right then. I should have said, "Call an ambulance. I'm dying and I need help." But the shame was so overwhelming. The fear of admitting what I'd done to myself so paralyzing that I just nodded and said I'd be fine. The Comfort Inn was only about 10 minutes from our house, but driving there felt like the longest journey of my life. I was shaking. My vision kept getting blurry, and I could feel my heart doing these strange, irregular beats. When I got to the front desk, the clerk took one look at me and asked if I was all right. I must have looked as terrible as I felt. I got to the room and immediately ran a hot bath, thinking maybe if I could just relax, maybe if I could just calm down, everything would be okay. But as soon as I turned off the water, this wave of absolute terror washed over me. I knew with complete certainty that if I got in that bathtub, I would lose consciousness and drown. It wasn't a fear. It was knowledge. I didn't even turn off the water. I grabbed my purse and ran out of that room like the building was on fire. I was barefoot, didn't have my car keys, didn't even close the door behind me. I just ran across that parking lot in my pajamas, and I didn't stop running until I was standing in the middle of Route 30 with cars swerving around me. This truck pulled over, this beat-up old pickup with a man inside who barely spoke English. He was frantically trying to ask if I was hurt, if I needed help, and I was crying so hard I could barely speak. But when he opened his passenger door for me to get in, there was a rosary hanging from his rearview mirror and a small wooden cross on his dashboard. In that moment, I knew God had sent him. He drove me to this little Catholic church about 3 miles up the road. I'd driven past it hundreds of times, but never been inside. The priest was there, this elderly man with the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. And the moment he saw me, he knew something was terribly wrong. He helped me inside, got me a glass of water, and just sat with me while I tried to catch my breath. "Child," he said gently, "what's your name?" And I opened my mouth to answer him, but nothing came out. I couldn't remember. I knew I had a name. I knew I had a family. But in that moment, I couldn't access any of it. The priest's face went very still, and he said, "Honey, do you believe in Jesus Christ?" With every bit of strength I had left, I whispered, "Yes, I believe in Jesus." And the moment those words left my lip, everything changed. It was like all the air rushed out of my lungs at once. But instead of panic, there was this incredible sense of relief. My body went completely limp, and suddenly I was floating above it, watching from the ceiling as the priest called 911. When I left my body, there was no transition, no moment of confusion. I was just suddenly free. And that first breath I took in my spiritual form, I'd never breathed like that before. It was like breathing pure love, pure light. I felt myself expanding beyond anything I'd ever experienced, like I was becoming part of something infinitely larger than myself. I watched the paramedics arrive, watched them work on my body, watched the priest praying over me while they loaded me into the ambulance. And for the first time in years, instead of criticism, instead of judgment, I felt this overwhelming gratitude for my physical form. I thought, "Thank you, body, for carrying me this far. Thank you for trying so hard for so long." Then I felt this presence beside me, not visible in any human sense, but unmistakably there. It was pure love, pure peace, and I knew immediately it was my guardian angel. Without speaking, the angel communicated to me that it was time to go, and suddenly we were moving upward through this tunnel of the most beautiful light I'd ever seen. The speed was incredible, but there was no fear, only exhilaration. The tunnel was filled with this music that wasn't quite music. It was more like the sound of love itself, if love could be heard. And the light wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm and welcoming, like being embraced by the sun itself. As we traveled, I kept thinking I couldn't possibly contain any more joy, any more love, any more peace than what I was already experiencing. But then more would come, and somehow I would expand to hold it. It was like my capacity for love was growing with each moment. Eventually, the angel's presence faded, and I found myself in the most magnificent space I could ever imagine. I was surrounded by stars, not just seeing them, but somehow among them, part of them. And then I felt it, the presence of God, not as a person or a figure, but as everything, as love itself, as peace itself, as home itself. For the first time in my entire existence, I was truly home. Earth had never been home. This was home. This connection, this love, this perfect acceptance. God wasn't just with me. God was all around me, through me, part of me. And I could communicate with God through pure thought, pure emotion, pure understanding. All my questions, all my fears, all my doubt from my earthly life came flooding through my consciousness, and God answered each one with such love, such patience. I understood that God had never judged me, had never been disappointed in me, had never seen me as anything less than perfect and beloved. Then God directed my attention forward, and I watched in amazement as the stars began to move, arranging themselves into this enormous screen. And suddenly, there it was, my life review. It started from the very beginning, me as a tiny baby, my first step, my first word. But what struck me was what God chose to highlight. There was me at age 6, giving half my Halloween candy to my little brother when he dropped his bag in a puddle. There was me at 12, staying after school to help the janitor clean up when other kids had made a mess. There was me at 16, driving my elderly neighbor to her doctor appointments when she couldn't drive anymore. These weren't the moments I would have chosen. These weren't my achievements or accomplishments. These were just small acts of love, small moments of kindness that I'd barely remembered. But to God, these were the jewels of my life. These were what mattered. As we walked, I began to understand something that revolutionized everything I thought I knew about life. God wasn't keeping score of my mistakes. God wasn't cataloging my failures, the bulimia, the pill, the years of self-destruction. God saw all of that as evidence of my pain. not my unworthiness. God's heart broke for my suffering, not because of my sins, but then something in my mind shifted and I started to panic. I'd been raised in church, taught about Judgment Day, taught about being held accountable for every wrong thing I'd ever done. Where was the judgment? Where was the condemnation I'd been taught to expect? God immediately sensed my confusion and filled me with the most profound understanding. Judgment is the opposite of love. God cannot judge because God is love. When we judge ourselves or others, we disconnect from love. We disconnect from God. All the time I'd spent on earth judging myself, hating myself, trying to make myself worthy. It had all been unnecessary. I was already worthy. I had always been worthy. Then God showed me something else. Sarah, God communicated, look to your right. Suddenly these enormous glasses appeared. Glasses the size of a small building. God said, put these on. These will show you what I see. Somehow, impossibly, I was able to lift these massive glasses and place them on my face, and they fit perfectly. And when I looked through them, I saw my life review again. But this time, I saw it through God's eye. Every moment of kindness, every instant of love, every time I'd chosen compassion over judgment, these moments blazed with light. The time I'd stayed up all night with my sick child, the time I'd forgiven my husband after a terrible fight, the time I donated my old clothes to the shelter instead of throwing them away. Thousands of tiny moments I'd never given a second thought to, and they were all precious to God. God showed me that this is what life is about. Not the big achievements, not the perfect body, not the flawless image. It's about love. It's about the small ways we care for each other, the tiny choices we make every day to be kind instead of cruel, to help instead of ignore, to love instead of judge. Then God said something that changed everything. Sarah, when you were born, I gave you gift. I gave you the gift of compassion, and I gave you the gift of beauty. And immediately I wanted to argue. I wasn't beautiful. That was the whole problem. That was why I destroyed myself, trying to become beautiful. But God gently corrected me. The beauty I gave you has nothing to do with your physical appearance. The beauty I gave you comes from your heart. It's in how you love people, how you see the best in them, how you make them feel valued and accepted. That beauty can never be taken away, can never be diminished, can never be improved upon. You are exactly as beautiful as I created you to be. For the first time in my entire life, I felt truly beautiful, not because of how I looked, but because of who I was, because of how God saw me, because of the love that lived inside me. Then God directed my attention to something in the distance, and I saw the earth appearing before me, close enough that I could feel the presence of everyone I love. But something was wrong. There were flames covering the planet. Not destructive flames, but flames of transformation. And rising from these flames were thousands upon thousands of lights shooting upward past me toward heaven. I realized these lights were souls, people leaving their earthly bodies and returning home to God. And I felt such joy watching them, such relief that they were safe, that they were free. But then God's presence changed, and I felt the most profound sadness I'd ever experienced. Not my sadness, God's sadness. Look again, God said. And this time I saw what I'd missed before. Not all the souls were rising. Some remained, flickering dimly in the flames, unable or unwilling to let go of their earthly attachments, their fears, their judgment, and God's heart was breaking for each one of them. Sarah, God explained, I gave each of my children free will. I cannot force anyone to accept my love, to choose connection over fear, to choose trust over control. Some souls choose to stay bound by their earthly concerns, their resentments, their need to be right. And everyone that chooses separation instead of love breaks my heart. I wanted to comfort God, wanted to say that surely these souls would eventually find their way home. But God showed me something else, that love must be freely chosen, that the very gift of free will that makes love possible also makes rejection possible. After the last soul had passed by me into heaven, I was filled with excitement, ready to follow them home. But God stopped me. Not yet, child. I have more work for you to do." God explained that in addition to compassion and beauty, I was being given 2 more gifts, wisdom and courage. When you return, you will share what you've learned. You will help people understand that they don't need to earn my love. They already have it. You will help them see their own beauty, their own worth, their own connection to me. I tried to protest, tried to argue that I wasn't qualified, that people wouldn't listen to someone who'd made such a mess of her own life. But before I could voice these objections, I felt myself being drawn back into a tunnel. But this tunnel was completely different from the one that had brought me to heaven. This tunnel was slow, heavy, filled with darkness and negative energy. I could hear voices, angry voices, bitter voices, voices full of hatred and despair. And then I felt hands grabbing at me, trying to pull me down toward them. These were souls who had chosen separation, who were trapped by their own anger and fear, and they were desperate to extinguish any light they could find. I was terrified, feeling my energy being drained by their grasping fingers. But then I remembered what God had taught me about love being a choice. I cried out, "God, I choose love. I choose you." And immediately, the hands released me, unable to hold on to someone who maintained that connection to divine love. I found myself back in the emergency room, hovering above my body, watching the doctors work frantically to save me. I could see my husband in the hallway, pacing and praying, and my heart filled with love for this man who had tried so hard to help me, who had never given up on me, even when I'd given up on myself. Then, without warning, I was slammed back into my physical body. The contrast was shocking, going from that expanded, unlimited spiritual form back into this dense, painful physical shell. But I was alive, and I had work to do. When I opened my eyes, my husband was crying, holding my hand, whispering prayers of gratitude. I tried to tell him what had happened, tried to explain about heaven and God and the incredible love I'd experienced, but my voice was gone. The medical team was focused on my physical recovery, running tests, administering medications, treating the damage I'd done to my body with years of pills and starvation. When the doctor finally came in to discuss my condition, I managed to find my voice enough to tell him about my experience. I'll never forget the look on his face. First confusion, then concern, then that professional mask that doctors put on when they think they're dealing with someone who's mentally unstable. Within hours, I was being transferred to a psychiatric facility. For the next 3 weeks, I was put on a cocktail of medications designed to make me stable, which apparently meant making me deny what I'd experienced. Every time I talked about my near-death experience, about meeting God, about the love and peace I'd found, they would adjust my medication. The message was clear. Agree that it was all a hallucination and we'll let you go home. So eventually, I learned to lie. I learned to say it was just oxygen deprivation, just my brain creating comforting illusions as it was dying. I learned to nod when they said I'd had a psychotic break, learned to agree that the pills they were giving me were helping me see reality more clearly. But inside, I knew the truth, and when I finally got home, when I was alone with my husband, I told him everything, the real everything. And because he knew me, because he'd seen the change in me that couldn't be explained by psychiatric medication, he believed me. That was 15 years ago. Since then, my life has been completely different. Not because my circumstances changed dramatically, but because I changed. I see myself the way God sees me now, as beloved, as beautiful, as worthy of love exactly as I am. I still live in the same small town, still have the same family, still face daily challenges and struggles, but I don't face them alone anymore. I carry that connection to divine love with me everywhere I go. When someone is unkind to me, instead of believing I deserve it, I remember that hurt people, and I respond with compassion. When I look in the mirror, instead of cataloging my flaws. I see God's beloved daughter. I became a hospice nurse after my experience because I wanted to help people transition peacefully from this life to the next. I wanted them to know what I know, that death is not the end, it's a homecoming, that we are not our bodies, we are not our mistakes, we are not our fears. We are love itself, temporarily inhabiting these physical forms, and when it's time to leave, we return to the source of all love. The most important thing I learned is that every single person walking this earth is fighting a battle we know nothing about. Everyone is struggling with something: insecurity, addiction, loss, fear, loneliness. And our job, our only real job, is to love each other through it. You don't have to earn God's love. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't have to look a certain way or achieve certain things to matter. You matter because you exist. You are loved because you are. And the love that created you is the same love that will welcome you home when your work here is done. If my story resonates with you, if you're struggling with your own sense of worth, your own battles with addiction or self-harm, please know that you are not alone. Please know that you are seen, you are valued, you are loved beyond measure. And please know that asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. Your life has meaning. Your story matters. And the love that lives inside you, that's the most beautiful thing about you. That's what makes you precious. That's what makes you exactly who you're supposed to be.